The Institute of Art and Olfaction is now in its 11th year of operation. And to probably a lot of people that might be listening to this, they run the annual Art and Olfaction Awards for indie perfumery. Saskia, thank you so much for joining me for this chat. And I just wanted to probably touch on something to start off the conversation. I recently watched a video where you were on a panel for Scentwave during LA's Scent Week a couple of months ago, and you mentioned your impetus for wanting to start the institute was the fact that you were finding that traditional perfumery or the perfume industry was kind of exclusionary, and it was difficult for you to get any kind of information or learn things. Can I get you to just elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, that's basically it. So I became interested in fragrance or perfume about 12, 13 years ago, maybe. And I wanted to learn about it. Not just to consume it, but to actually, I'm an artist, so I wanted to make and work and incorporate it into art. And at the time, there was really nowhere at all that I could learn. There were perfumers teaching, so there was a couple perfumers who taught classes, but there was no sort of formalized or institutionalized or regular, access to the materials. And so that it was that simple. I mean, it was selfish. I wanted to learn, and no one would teach me, so I thought I'd teach myself, and then assuming that others would also have that curiosity, I instead of just making it a personal studio, I created this sort of open nonprofit to create that access to other people. That's sort of the genesis. That was the gist of the beginning.
And looking back to the beginning, could you even envisage or imagine what the institute itself would grow into and look like now? Has it grown into something now that you could not have possibly imagined?
Yeah. I mean, it started, for the full story is that it started, as what's known as a social practice. So at the time was known as social practice and art. So it's art that's engaged in the community and trying to change something. So you get a lot of people who are working with nonprofits, especially here in California. That was a thing. So it was an art project for me, in addition to being, this other thing. And then what I imagined was, I would do this for 3 years and move on, So no, I mean, certainly the Institute has definitely had more staying power than I expected and has evolved and grown way more than I could have thought,
I can't even begin to imagine what your day-to-day at the Institute looks like, apart from being the founder and director. You're working with the board of directors.
Yes.
And I'm interested in what your average day at the Institute would look like and how hands-on are you still with everything?
Yeah, very, unfortunately. I mean, it's funny, I have a new colleague coming in, and he came in and I was sweeping and I've been doing solutions all day, and he's like, you shouldn't be doing this, but that's the reality is when you're running a nonprofit, and if there's a cockroach, I move it out, if the windows need cleaning, I clean them. So very hands-on. Having said that, over the years, thank God, there's been a community of people who have come on to help. So I have a team now of people, and so we have a little crew in addition to the board of directors that we meet twice a year to do larger, or 3 times a year to do larger scale sort of decision processes. But yeah, on the daily, it's very much me and my crew.
Was it a difficult process finding the people to help you put together or run the institute, forming that network? Was it something that happened organically, or was there a plan put in place, people you knew you needed to speak to? How did that all work out?
Yeah, both. I mean, in the beginning, it was really difficult because in the beginning, there wasn't much of a community, at least that I knew of here in Los Angeles. So the beginning, I was sort of reliant on people hearing about it and reaching out to me, and asking to be involved. And then, oh yeah, cool. So I mean, I met, one of our longest standing teachers, Ashley Eaton Kessler, came to me that way. But now, now a lot of the people who work here have come through here. So a lot of the people who are on staff started by taking one of our open sessions, 10, 11 years ago. Thank you. And my friend brought me a coffee. and then sort of evolved their practice and then started working here. So Minetta came through open sessions. Julianne, who works with me here, came through open sessions. Many of the members of the board. So we sort of created our own community just through people's curiosity and participating in the programs, which is really cool because they've understood the Institute from the bottom up, from the outsider perspective, and now from obviously someone who works there. So it's been pretty awesome in that way.
And as far as I know, I'm not aware of many or any other organizations that are really doing what the Institute is currently set up for. I know that you have a variety of online lessons, articles on the website. You do the olfactive art exhibitions, installations, and I'm aware that you're also putting together an archive or library of sorts, cataloging materials, scents, and so on.
Yes, we're starting. Actually, I don't know if you can see it. Well, that's so. What I just showed you was our the beginning of our library, and then what you're not seeing is in the back behind there, and we call it the closet of doom because it's a mess. Is about 1,200 perfumes, that we're trying to. A lot of them were donated through a friend of ours, a friend of me, and a couple people here died. And gave a lot of them. So we inherited this collection, and we were like, uh-oh. And he committed suicide, so it was sort of, we felt like we had a responsibility to do something with this collection. So that started this new program, which is this archive, where we're going to hopefully create an accessible archive of books and objects and perfumes here in California. Now, but your question was, are there other institutions doing this? And the good news is there are, at the time I started, there was the Osmothèque. That was it in Versailles, right? And their job is they archive, perfume history, and it's a super, super important role that they played. But what they didn't do, I felt, was create that access, to just the materials, like just what is hexanol cis-3, So since the Institute started, at the time, as far as I know, we were the only ones, but since it started, there have been others that have come to the fore, like Smell Lab in Berlin, run by Clara Ravat, a library of, olfactive materials in Glasgow. Now there's a gallery in New York, Olfactory Art Keller, there's I'm trying to remember her name right now, but there's a woman in Australia, actually, also, who has, what's it called? Perfume Playground, maybe? So there's more institutions or organizations that are forming, and the point of the Institute for me was to create a model that was successful and replicable. So my goal was never to make money, thank God. It was to create a structure where people could see that you could actually maintain an open practice in fragrance while not, putting yourself out of business or whatever, you know what I mean? So that was the point. The point was to be copied. So when people started opening these nonprofits or these organizations, I was super excited because it was showing that this is something that can be done. Open access can be sustained. Yeah.
Did you ever think of perfumery in as traditional perfumery that people consume and spray on as an art form, or did you never think of it that way? Was there a point where your thinking changed on that aspect of perfumery as we all know it?
My answer, when people ask me this, I always feel like I'm about to bum you out, but no, I did not care about perfumery, is the truth. I was raised partially in Paris, so I was exposed to it. Mostly and I did look back in my childhood notebooks, of, drawing notebooks, and I did find little perfume bottles, and like I invented some perfume ads. So there was something there, but I didn't think about perfume in terms of something that actually related to me or my life. Because frankly, I mean, I don't know what your age is, but when I was growing up, a lot of the fragrances that were marketed towards women were totally alien to how I understood my own place in the world. These like really fancy women, and I was like, I'm like, that's not me, So I never felt like there was a way in until I discovered brands like um, Demeter fragrances from Christopher Brocious, or and even I'll say even like CK1 sort of started to provide a little bit of a sense of access to the world of fragrance. So long story short, like perfume wasn't a thing that I fantasized over as a young girl, really, as far as I remember. But when I discovered the fragrance industry through a book by Chandler Burr about Luca Turin's efforts to prove the vibration theory of smell.
Was that The Emperor of Scent?
Yeah, The Emperor of Scent. Yeah. A friend of mine, I was working at a TV network. He's like, you might like this. And it completely changed my life. So thank you, Luca. Thank you, Chandler, But what I found particularly fascinating was, the materials themselves are, these little bottles of mystery and beauty. It's totally engaging and exciting. But in addition to that, the industry itself, the way it was set up, from what I could gather from the various books I read at the time, just felt really bizarre to me. It just didn't feel inclusive. It didn't feel like it was reaching anybody like me, let alone people a little bit even more different than me. It just felt like it was very cookie cutter, norm, Eurocentric, et cetera. So, and maybe you can relate to this being in Australia, but, on the West Coast of the US, like, we're at the end of that world. We are not looking to Europe, we're looking elsewhere for the most part. So it just felt really out of touch with how me and everybody I knew was living our lives. So that's what interested me.
So you had a childhood growing up in Paris, and you didn't always have this interest in traditional perfumery. But I'm always interested to ask people and find out what their earliest childhood or what their earliest scent memory is. What is yours?
I have two. I mean, one is related to just my own personal experience. So I was in the south of France in a place called Cap d'Agde, which is it's on the south. And I remember I was sitting on a bale of hay with my friend Valerie, and it was summer, and there was this nice green, grassy hay note with some cows in the distance. But it was also a haptic experience. It was the wind and the warmth of the air. And as far as like perfume memories, my first perfume was something that they used to give kids in France called Tartine et Chocolat, which was like a fragrance for kids,
And it sounds like a gourmand.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised. It's actually right. It should be. It's actually citrusy, but yeah, I know. But for some reason, I always remembered it as a gourmand until I found my bottle. I had the bottle still. So yeah, so that's sort of a very early perfume connection that I made, but that didn't relate to perfume with a capital P as sort of I experienced it as a teenager. That was more like a pleasant scent that you could put on to enhance your life, which is maybe how I should have been thinking about scent. But yeah, was that an answer to your question, or did I digress? Sorry.
Yeah. I'm always curious about to find out about why someone really likes or connects with a particular scent. I know that some people, love particular perfumes because it takes them directly back to a particular childhood memory. And other times, I know this happens for myself, that I might really love a perfume purely because of the creative imagery that it invokes. And I'm always curious to find out how much, it always intrigues me how much people think about the reasons they like a particular perfume.
Well, it's a challenging thing for me. And this is something that Luca Turin said to me once. He said, somebody said, hey, what's your favorite scent memory or something? He said, look, I've been working with fragrance for so many years. I know all the molecules. I've completely I've gone through the process of disassociating my personal memories from these materials, which are now working materials, So, and unfortunately, and at the time I was like, oh, come on, dude, like, of course you have set memories. But and I do, but I have found that his comment has started to ring true for me, that I've been working with these aromatics, on a molecular level, each individual material for, let's say 12 years, nigh on 12 years. And so now, the scent of cut grass, for instance, rather than trigger that, south of France memory I relayed, I immediately think, okay, hexanol, cis-3, triplol, whatever the green materials are. So I start to equate it with this sort of working knowledge of what the actual aromatics are, which is really cool, but also kind of ruins all the mystery and fun. You know what I mean? Like I don't get to be like, oh, delve into my own personal recollections, because it's become my job, to know these things to a degree. So yeah, so I have a disadvantage in that regard. Having said that, I will occasionally come across a fragrance that really, really does move me in a way that I can't define, and so, yeah, recently I bought a perfume called Pistachio something by Keis or Kais. It's a very small brand. Yeah. And I don't know why. I mean, it's not like I smelt it and I was like, I've never smelt this before, or, oh, it reminded me of blah, blah, blah. I just, for some reason, it spoke to me. So there's sometimes that happens where something just moves you and you can't really verbalize it. And I like those moments because they're increasingly rare.
I guess this kind of comes back a little bit to the way people react or connect to any kind of art form. They don't necessarily have to understand what it is, or the technicalities behind it, but they might. I guess good art is something that makes you have a reaction, whether it's emotional, visceral, and the same, I guess, would be for perfumes.
Well, I think that's the point, but I think that's the disadvantage of professionalizing your passion, I mean, I have friends who are artists, like visual artists, and they go to a gallery show and they'll look at a painting. They'll be like, okay, I see how they did that. Or, oh, so-and-so did that. Or, it's sort of the knowledge almost ruins the magic, and yeah.
I guess that circles back a little bit to this thing currently where you being enthusiastic or into perfume as much as people like me are, I end up talking to a lot of other people who are as interested, as deeply into it, and then you find that the conversations that you have about perfume become a little bit circular, or and frankly sometimes boring, because there's a sort of a level of attained knowledge about what you're talking about, and I've really been finding it more interesting to when I'm talking to people who are not into perfume, don't know anything about notes, ingredients and all of that, and they're just smelling things very instinctively, and listening to the way they're describing it, or what it reminds them of, and things like that. I just find really interesting.
Yeah. And I can relate to that, because a lot of what I do here, a lot of what we do is we have people like absolute newcomers. I mean, we're firmly oriented towards the outside world. Like, we serve the perfume community to a degree, but really our main purpose is to create access to new people. So 95% of the people I interact with on a daily basis are walking in off the street and smelling these things for the first time. And I mean, even within that context, it can get a little repetitive. I'm sure, you and I have both heard the scent is tied to memory. I don't know if you're aware. Yeah. But nevertheless, the sort of enthusiasm and also the personal stories and the connections that it triggers are really pretty cool, and I'd never get tired of that after 12 years, it's, yeah. And the main thing, maybe you feel the same way, is the sort of, the doing away of barriers that scent can create, where we have these open sessions where we have, 8 people from all walks of life, some people visiting, some people from here, never would come across each other in the real world, and they're sitting here, and at first they're kind of all a little careful with each other. And by the end, they're smelling each other's arms, and they're really like, they're making friends. And it does away with social boundaries, which is really super, super cool. And I think it's something about the embodiment of the experience. It's like your experience is real. There's no class, there's no education. Your experience is real, and it's valid no matter what you bring to it.
From a sensory point of view, I think, in my opinion, smell is a real instinctive, more authentic way to experience something, as opposed to something like visual or auditory. There sometimes when you're experiencing something with those senses, you can there can still be a level of deception that I don't find so much with the sense of smell, because what I'm smelling is kind of real to me.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, there's an incontrovertible truth to how we experience smell. You know, I mean, what I smell is entering my body, and my perception is my perception, and it's real. Having said that, on the deception question, I mean, as you're, I'm sure, very well aware, you know, I mean, there is a lot of deception in fragrance, and because it's so hard to verbalize scent, as I know you know, it's very easy to trick people, I think, and sort of sell them a sell them a perception that isn't necessarily real. But then, what is real? You know, I mean, what is truth? Like, what is our experience? If it's colored by language, then does it make it less real? Maybe not. You know, so I don't know. I don't know if I have anything very smart to add there, but you know.
And that did just remind me of something that was mentioned in the Scent Rave panel at LA Scent Week,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the language used or the vocabulary that
Mm-hmm.
exists to describe
Scent.
perfume and the notes that are being smelled, and how people who are more into perfume, and probably have access to a vocabulary that might mean something to other people who have read the same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah, like the word chypre. I mean, if you don't know what chypre means, if you're not bought into the perfume, you know, if you're not a frag head or whatever, fragcom, what do they call it? I don't know what they call themselves, but if you're not in the know, chypre means nothing to you, you know? I mean, you tell some kid in, I don't know, a mall in LA, hey, do you like chypre fragrances? They'll be like, what? You know? So, I mean, the way we try to get around that at the Institute is we try to create as much access to as broad a population as possible to the most precise terminology in fragrance, which is the terminology of aromatic materials, chemical names, material names. If you know and I know what methylcyclopentenolone or isoe super or whatever smells like, and I say that to you, that is a very precise communication. And there's no trickery or poetry that can change that communication. It is what it is. We both know what that is, you know. So that's sort of the way I approach that. Is the poetry's lovely, the trickery is lovely. I'm a big fan of creative writing, but if you really want to make perfume a form of communication, you really need to focus on giving people the understanding of what these words mean, you know, and not through cultural tradition like chypre and whatever, you know, fougère and all these, even words like aldehydic, you know, I mean, or fragrance families like aldehydic, that implies a degree of buy-in, you know, so what I'm trying to, I guess, do is create a degree of buy-in by letting people understand the actual material names and what that smells like. And then they'll be informed and they'll be able to use fragrance as a tool for communication in a precise way. That's the goal, you know. Of course, it's tricky and you can't reach everybody, you know. So, yeah.
And even just within one of the terms like fougere or chypre, there can be so much variation in how something smells just within that one, that singular
Oh,
descriptor.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Now, I also couldn't help notice in your Instagram feed, there was a post there that mentioned something to do with a PhD you're working on relating to perfume. Are you able to talk a little bit
Yes.
more about that?
Trying. I'm meant to be in Ireland right now. Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the middle of a PhD. I'm exploring the relations of power in the fragrance industry. Surprise, surprise. You know, it's obviously my obsession. And I'm about halfway through, and I'm doing it at University College Dublin in Ireland through a program there called Smart Lab, which is sort of a cross. It's a program designed for adults, you know, who have a career or maybe late or mid career, And it's basically a program where people who are working in the field of accessibility, so that can be technology, a lot of the people on the program with me are technology people, or it can be how I'm interpreting it, which is, access to perfume technology, but it's all about, the program is about accessibility. And so people are working on, AI tools for accessibility, blah, blah, blah. I'm working on mapping the reason, or the I guess the relationships of power that have created the industry as it is today, this sort of inaccessible space, and also how that's changing. That's the cool thing, is the last part of the PhD will be sort of mapping the evolution and the quote democratization of the industry through institutes like my own, bloggers, podcasts like yours, how people are sharing and spreading knowledge in a way that we couldn't before the internet. So it's like a big topic, but
You obviously sound like someone who needs to keep busy.
yeah, it's a bit of a madness and a problem, maybe.
What were, if any, some of the biggest obstacles that you came up against when you were in the process of setting up the institute, and even going forward, that you didn't really expect to come across?
It's sort of interesting because, I mean, there's the obstacles of setting up a nonprofit, and I don't know. I mean, just renting a place, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was an artist. I was working at a TV network, which was, I was a tourist there. I had no clue what I was doing. But to be honest, it was easier then than it is now, because at the time, since I had so little exposure to the industry, since I had no idea what I was doing, I didn't care. Like, there was no, I was like, I don't care, I don't care what people think, I don't care what the industry thinks. I mean, who are these people? I don't even know these people. They're all the way in wherever they are, they're not here in my little group of artists. So it wasn't that hard, okay, having said that, the caveat is that since I knew nothing, and the public nature of the Institute required that I know something, so that people don't burn their houses down, even, finding the people with knowledge who were accessible to me and local, I'd say was the biggest hurdle. But luckily for me, we have in LA, we have Scent Bar and Lucky Scent. And I met Franco and Adam, who run Lucky Scent, and Stephen, who manages Scent Bar, very, very early on. And so they provided a whole host of connections and resources, and they helped me with just meeting Ashley Eden Kessler, who was educated in fragrance, and then she knew some people who she could bring in, and Sarah Horowitz-Tron came in. So people started to trickle in who were knowledgeable, and Yosh, and there's folks that were working, that were around. So just connecting with them sort of helped mitigate that. And then, I made no promise, and I made no pretense then, as I do now, of being an expert in this. I'm not an expert in perfumery. I'm a nonprofit director, So also mitigating expectations really made it easier, I think. People didn't come to me expecting me to be like ISIPCA trained, because I'm not, I'm an artist, so that helped. Yeah, sorry, that was a long answer.
No, not long at all. And looking ahead for the Institute, are there any main goals or projects that you're thinking about, or is it at the moment really just getting the archive library of materials done?
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, the launching our archive has been incredibly difficult. Just a ton of like data entry and getting Library of Congress numbers, stuff like that. We have so many programs. We have the awards, we have our archive, we have a gallery, we have our education, we have Experimental Scent Summit, we have a podcast. We have so much going on that I think the big challenge for the next 10 years, I'll say, is one, finding strategies where if I get hit by a bus, what happens? Like finding strategies for the Institute to live beyond me. There's something called founder's syndrome. I don't know if you're aware of it. It's like when the founder hangs on to their baby, like with, to the death. Like, I don't want to be that person. I want to be able to step away and hand it off at some point, because I think that would be healthy, because it wouldn't be limited by me, So that's the big challenge, is sort of the next steps, like how the Institute survives past me, which thank God there's a lot of really great people helping with that. That's the big picture thing I'm worrying about. As far as like the programs, like the awards, were coming up on our 10th year, so we have to make it really big and really fun, and that's a lot of work. We're gonna do them in Lisbon, which is gonna be a lot of fun. That's a little spoiler.
As long as you don't mind me spoiling it.
No, that's why I
did
said it.
note that the awards are held in different cities.
Yeah, that's because I was raised between different countries, and if I don't travel, I go crazy. So it's my very clever strategy for making my life what I want it to be. And so what we're going to do now is every other year we'll be in LA because we're based here and we need to do honor to our community. And then the other year will be somewhere. So, I mean, we've been talking about coming to Australia forever, Lisbon is next year, there's places we want to go. Cuba, my dad wants us to do it in Cuba. That's challenging.
I am putting in a good word for Melbourne if you do end up coming.
Yeah, you're not the only one. There's a few people in Melbourne that are putting in a good word for Melbourne.
Now, I'm going to ask you a couple of more personal questions in relation to perfume. Do you actually wear a perfume every day?
Yeah, I actually do. And I have an unfortunately large collection.
Are you willing to disclose how many bottles that is?
Lord, I haven't. I donated a bunch of them to the Institute last year. So now I probably have about 30 that are in rotation. I keep them in rotation, and then when I stop using them, I donate them to the Institute. I have this very fortunate thing where I have access to our archive. So if I change my mind, I can spray, But right now in rotation, there is Wonderwood by Comme des Garçons. Sorry to be so generic, but I like it. There is Duro by Nasomatto, a perfume that Luca Turin called the scent that an Italian man wished his crotch smelled like. Gave it 1 star, and I'm like, bring it on. Sounds fantastic to me, and I love it.
I actually like Duro.
I like Duro too. It's so beautiful. Luca doesn't like it, but whatever. We all have our opinions, And his is probably more informed than mine, but I like it. And then I have what do I have in there? I have Bee by Zoologist. Super like dripping gourmand honey. I just told you I got that Pistachio by Keis or Kais. I'm not sure how to. I have a perfume called Chango by a Modern Peasant, a small brand based out of Oakland by Lakenda Wallace. I have got so many more. I know I'm forgetting one that's really important to me. What is it? Oh, Fundamental. That's the one. Yeah, Fundamental is my number one go-to. I wear that maybe 2-3 times a week. And I should just qualify that I have many, many, many more by all these amazing perfumers, and I hope no one's offended I didn't mention their perfume.
Now, do you remember the actual first perfume you bought for yourself?
Bought Duro by Nasomatto. I mean, in this recent iteration of interest, so let's say, I think it was 2010 or something, I bought that. Yeah, that was sort of my so my introduction to this world was I read that book, and then I don't know how or why, but somehow, I don't know how. I was working at a TV network, maybe it was through that, but somehow I managed to attend some event that Luca Turin did in Washington, D.C. with Christophe Laudamiel, if I remember correctly. And I met those two. So I met some really amazing people very, 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 and Cecil Tolas as well, like very early on. And so I had this, I think, abnormal entry into fragrance in that I met these totally, expert people quite early. And so they introduced me to things, that I don't think I would have had the opportunity to discover without their knowledge. But from there, I went to Lucky Scent, and I remember Duro was the one I picked up and kept, out of all the amazing options. Yeah, I still have it.
And for anyone visiting LA and going to the Institute of Art and Olfaction, is it set up for the public to be able to walk in and see what's there and smell what you have there?
Yes, I mean there's a location. It's funny. I'm laughing because on our window, people can't see it, but I'll describe it. I'm facing the front of the Institute, the main room, and there's it's a former gallery space that is now our space now for 10 years in this location. But on the window, it says our hours are occasional. So people are always like, when can I come? And I'm like, I don't know. You have to find us. It's a little bit of serendipity. So generally, people come in for classes, or they make appointments, or we happen to be here when they walk by. So there's a little bit of serendipity at play, just because we don't have the budgets for the staffing to keep it open all the time. It's that's the only reason. But it is a location you can come in and smell things and read books and see art and have a coffee, have a chit chat.
I'm curious to know what your views are on this, given how closely you are working with independent perfumers, perfume brands, and I was just wondering, within the fragrance community, there is a lot, I guess, a discourse about the impact of clone perfumes, dupes, companies that produce these type of perfumes. I'm just curious about what your general views are on that, and what impact that might be having on independent perfumery.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tricky question, because of course there's two perspectives and they're both valid. I will say that art needs to be supported, and people need to support artists. So, I think in that sense, the dupes can be damaging for artists. Now, do we consider a multinational corporation an artist? That's a question you answer. I don't know. My perspective on it is that creativity is something that needs to be respected, but also people's right to access things that they love also needs to be respected. And so if you have these corporations and these companies, and I'm not trying to be too critical, like there's room for that, but we all know capitalism is problematic. You know what I mean? So we have these companies that are selling this dream to us of, you too can be exclusive and beautiful and blah, blah, blah. And then, selling materials and perfumes to us that definitely require artistry and definitely employ important, lovely people, nevertheless are overpriced or end up in the ocean. I don't know. Do I have a problem with the fact that then some young kid who can't afford that can be part of that little dream for less? Not really, frankly. I mean, I'm sure people will disagree with me, but I just feel like we have a right to engage with our sense of smell. And if it's at the behest of these like sinister capitalist motives all the time, then we have a problem. So I think the dupes in that sense sort of subvert that a little bit. And the punk rock in me is like, right on. Having said that, for the artisan perfumers who are getting duped, that sucks, because they're small brands and they really can't afford to lose that income. So that's my answer. I'm sure, I see both perspectives on it, but the punk rock in me is sort of quietly, down for the subversion.
And like you said, if it is introducing people to scent in a way that's accessible to them, I guess it can't be a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. And there's some perfumers who are super savvy, who understand this dynamic, and who are like, forget this exclusionary nonsense. Like, for instance, Andreas Wilhelm, who prints his formulas on his bottle. I mean, how cool is that? He's like, duplicate it. If you have the desire and the will to duplicate it, by all means, go for it. And his rationale for that is, it's not going to hurt his bottom line, because the people who want his stuff are going to want his stuff because they believe in him or whatever. And the people who know how to duplicate and want to sell the duplicates, it's not enough of an economic impact for him that it should scare him from being open, And there's other perfumers like who believe that way as well, I mean, so yeah, I mean, I just think we need to get real, this exclusionary sort of exclusivity stuff. It doesn't lead us down the path of cultural development and evolution. And, I don't know. I've had my stuff copied, not perfume, but other things. And it definitely stings, you feel it, you notice it, and you're like, oh, bummer, but I don't know. The ideas are still come, so just make something new and make something cool and forget about it, move on. Anyway, that's my opinion. Sorry. I'm sure somebody will disagree.
And I mean, it isn't just that black and white, is it?
No, it isn't. And I should say my background is, my interest has always been in open source, and I worked for like a piracy initiative in film and TV. So I have a distinct perspective on it that I understand is not, and it's not everybody's perspective, nor should it be. It's just my point of view on it, so yeah.
I'm going to ask you one final question, Saskia, before you go, and that is, do you think that the industry is more transparent today than it was when you first got involved?
No, I don't. I think that the industry, okay, the caveat is the industry is made up of people, and most people I've met are awesome. Nevertheless, they're working within structures that they have no control over often, that are not designed. Transparency doesn't, it's not an advantage to the board members, to have transparency. So no, I don't think it's more transparent than it used to be. However, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff around the industry that is growing and evolving and becoming, legitimized in the public eye, that is helping mitigate that sort of lack of transparency. So I think perfumery as a whole is more transparent. The industry itself is exactly the same, as far as I could tell. By which I mean the big industry, of course, like the fragrance houses.
And I've noticed that even in the last few years, or less than a decade, how much the growth of niche topics like perfumery, especially in social media, have kind of sort of proliferated a whole bunch of information that wasn't always available to everyone. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. So I guess more transparency exists for sure. Yeah. But the industry isn't at the root of that. It's people like Christophe Lodemiel, or it's people who are subverting that are forcing this conversation forward, and forcing that transparency. But I as far as I can tell, it's definitely an uphill battle, But this will change.
Absolutely. Saskia, thank you so much for your time and coming on to chat with me. It's been a big pleasure to meet you and talk to you and ask you questions. I really, really appreciate it.
You too. Yeah, you too. I'm sorry I rambled.
No, I loved that you rambled, and the less talking I have to do, the better. Saskia Wilson-Brown, thank you very much.
Thanks, Pep. Enjoy your day.